Greetings and welcome back to another Dremel Studios tutorial. So in this one we're going to be looking at the charcoal sketch action for Photoshop that I created. And this basically is I wanted something that imitated the look of actual charcoal on paper, and I have not really ever seen anything that in my opinion came close to having that sort of look. So I decided to try and make one of my own, and I am not a great action maker. I do most of my edits by hand, but here are some before and afters using just the image and simply applying the action. These were the end results of what I finally came up with. This was about my 5th try at making this particular action. I tried a lot of different things that I thought would work really well, and they didn't. They either didn't have the same look that I was going for, or I had just put the action together not very well, had some errors and such. But I will demonstrate now what the action does using a cute picture of a puppy. So you load up whatever image you're hoping for to use. In this instance, for this action, just because it does have some sharpening details and some outlying edge effects that it does, I recommend using an image that's at least 2500 pixels on the shortest side, which means you do have to use pretty high quality images. This might work for some cell phone shots, I really don't know. I've been trying to use higher quality images myself so that the effect and that's what I basically created the action on, was a higher quality image. So it definitely looks a lot better if you use a higher pixel count image. So you would load the image up. Over here you can see I have charcoal sketch action saved, and it goes through this pretty detailed list of things that it does that I have recorded in steps. So you would go over and press play. It starts doing all these different processes and grabbing the image, and you want to actually see a preview of it on the image that you've loaded up. It will show you the progress bar, and of course it depends on the speed of your computer and the size of the image. There's varying factors, but when it's all done running, this is the final effect. And you can see that there are actual there's simulations of paper, like a paper text sort of texture on the image, so it looks like it was actually scrawled on like a grainy type of paper print. I used to use a lot of sketchbooks when I was younger and draw with charcoal, and I've done watercolors and oil paints and finger paints and pretty much every kind of manual art tool that you can think of. So I wanted something that had that look of paper but didn't have the overdone effect that I have seen done so many times when people are talking about charcoal. So that is it creates itself as its own, once it's all done, it'll save itself as one layer that's just marked sketch, and you can turn that off and on so you can see the before and the after of what it's done to the image. And if you decide that you don't like it on the image, or maybe it's just too strong, you can always go down and reduce the opacity on this sketch layer to reveal the layer below it a little bit more, to show some more colors and some of the details. I personally am a fan of altering the layer style for the sketch layer. So I have found that overlay, I actually really like the effect that that gives to a lot of the image. Now this one might be a little bit too much contrast. It just depends on the image that you're working with, but if you wanted to, you could always drop that down a little bit in the contrast level. Or instead of overlay, you might try a screen, which does make it a lot brighter, especially for your darks. Possibly a soft light. There's a big difference in contrast between overlay and soft light, and you can still see that there are the sketchier marks in like around the nose and the eyes, and the fur still has that sort of a paper texture look, but it also lets the color and the feel of the image below it come through as well. And you can always play with whatever layer style you want. I am actually just a big fan of the black and white, but it really depends on the image. So that's what it does on just a random picture. Just to demonstrate, just so you understand why I'm saying that you don't want on a lower quality image. So this image is 466 pixels by 700 pixels, so it's not that big of a picture. And although the action will run a lot quicker on this particular image, you'll see why I don't recommend using lower quality images for the charcoal effect. I think. Okay, there we go. Alright, so while it's going through its actions, alright, so when it's all done, just zooming in a little bit, you can already see that the pixels that are in the lower quality image, it was already pixelated, and now they've been amplified and exaggerated because of the sketch action, and the picture just doesn't look very clean. It's got a lot of edges here that are just, you know, this at this size, it doesn't look very bad. I mean, it looks like, you know, it's a pretty cool effect that it applies to it, but unfortunately it's just a very low quality image with extremely low quality results. So if you can, use larger images, use better quality images, and you can still use them where they have the gradient background like the gray in here, because it does create some really cool line effects. It has like a paper texture as if somebody maybe crinkled the paper before they drew on it. But that's why I would not recommend using a lower quality image. So let's grab another example and I can show you something else. So here is a very bright, very blown out image in my opinion, but it is of the right size. It's 3000 pixels by 5000 pixels approximately. So with this image selected, go up, hit the charcoal action, press play, and while it runs through its processes, you'll see that more than likely we're going to have a lot of the eye left and probably the lips because they're darker, but a lot of this white area out in the outside is probably going to be fairly lost as far as details go with the sketch action. Okay, so there you go. It amplified a little bit on the neck here a spot and some other areas that are just, you know, if you zoom in, the texture is there, but it's very light. It's very subtle. I really like how the scratches and stuff are, though. It really looks like it was, you know, paper has a very, sometimes an unforgiving effect to it when you're drawing on it with pencil, with pen, with charcoal, any kind of medium that you're using with it. Sometimes the paper will just reject in certain lines, and that's really cool. It gives it a very specific tone. So that is the before image. There is after the sketch is applied, and just for the sake of showing here what you can do, that it's not just a one-stop button press. I don't really like having actions. I don't use them very often for my pictures, just because if I'm going to take the time to edit a picture, I want it to have a personal touch, and not every picture is the same. You can't simply make an action and then just apply that to every single image that you have. I go through, I don't know how many hundreds of different types and styles, and sometimes it's a little bit of touch-up, and other times it's a lot of touch-up on a single image. So I have gone up and selected a large 494 pixel soft brush. I have the layer set to color burn, and I'm going to drop it down to about 10%. And then on the layer itself, I'm going to go with the color burn and go in and touch up and sort of darken the sketch effect in areas. And this, of course, is a very particular effect, and for me, I just want a little bit more of that texture that was there that the paper effect has. 10% might be a little bit too much, so I'm going to bump that up to 15. Now with the color burn brush, with the color burn effect added, it is going to darken up all of your dark lines. So anything that is dark, but anything that's black or gray, but it's very light, it's going to keep making it darker and darker the more you brush over it. So you do want to be careful. You don't want to have it set to 70% and then go over, because you're going to make some very quick, very large changes to your image. But right now I'm just going over the parts that do have a little bit of gray and the texture is there, but you just can't see it, even though the effect has applied it. It's just too white. Go up a little bit more. I'm trying to stay away as much as I can from the lines of the ear and the jaw. There we go. That's not too bad. I just don't want to make it too dark. I want to make it look like it's still sort of a sketch. You don't want to make it too dark and too finished looking, because it will have that effect of looking too overdone, too overcooked. At least in my opinion. Obviously you can do whatever you want to with it, but alright, so as you can see there, once I get away and zoom in, so there is a paper, sort of a pulp paper type effect that has been applied now around the bottom of the ear, around the jaw. You can still see all the details in the eye and the cheek. The teeth look really good, even though there's still kind of that scratchier black black effect in the mouth. It looks like it hasn't been completely finished, which is what you want from a sketch action. That's what I wanted, at least. So yeah, it looks like it could have been something that was drawn on paper, and having done so many different pictures that I have over the years with both pencil and charcoal, I would always use my thumb, sort of the side of my thumb most of the time, and I would smudge in places like the ear. You would kind of get your thumb in there and you would smudge it up just a little bit just to help widen that out. You didn't want that fine charcoal point. You wanted more of a blur or a shading effect in some ways. So that's what I used to do, and will still do when I do charcoal stuff. It's just been a while. But I really wanted that effect for a Photoshop action that made it a lot easier, saved a lot of steps, and helped apply the effect in ways that I might not even be able to do myself, as far as without using a very specific brush. So that is the way that it is applied to that image. I actually really like that. It looks like it is a sketch or a drawing, and it was made from a photograph. So that is yet another way you can do it, and you can obviously apply this in whatever layer you like to as well. It doesn't have to be in the normal, and you could drop down the opacity if you wanted to have a little bit more show through. But I really like that when it's just the black and white sketch effect. But we did apply the burn using the paintbrush, using the color burn, to bring out those lighter tones a little bit, just because the picture was so blown out. Alright, so one more example, just to show. So in this next one, I wanted to use an image and show what can be done as far as the fine details. So in this one, I'm going to select this image. This one is not as large as I would like, but it'll still keep the same amount of details. This is 1900 pixels by 2100 pixels. Let me zoom in here so you can see that she is very, the front area of her face and the hair and even her hand are very in focus, whereas the rest of it from her shoulder back looks like it gets a little lost in focus, out of focus. It was probably a shallow depth of field. So I'm going to select the charcoal action, I'm going to apply it, it's going to run through its processes, and once it's done, we're going to be presented with a very sort of a dramatic, there we go, so there's a very dramatic change, and what it's done with the background is created almost this sort of a crosshatch pattern, as if someone using a ruler and a pencil or a charcoal pen with a fine tip went through and just kind of scratched in this sort of, not hurried, but it's not a finished portrait by any means. Alright, so this is a great example of the detail that comes with the action and how it's applied it to the skin and the layers around her nose and even her eyelids, especially the hair. And just for fun, I haven't actually tried it with this picture, but I'm going to duplicate the bottom layer, and then what we're going to do with that, so there's the bottom layer right there, and there's the sketch action. So I'm going to turn this into an overlay so that it has this very scratched sort of painting-esque look. And you can still see that there are details in the nose, but obviously with it being as bright as it is on top as far as an overlay, it does lose a lot of details in the brighter areas. But what I'm going to do with the bottom layer is I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to apply a blur. It might be a little bit too much, but basically I just wanted to blur it so the colors and the lines are not as defined. That's pretty good. So that's how blurry it is from this. This is the original image, this is the blurred image from the Gaussian blur, and then this is the sketch overlay. Now obviously you can apply whatever layer style you prefer. You could make it into a soft light. So it brings back some of those scratch details, but it still has that color. In some ways it almost looks like a watercolor, a very fine watercolor. It's not as messy as most watercolor is. But without it being soft light, let's try a couple of others. Yeah, some of these are just almost too dramatic in my opinion for the image and for the details in it. And not every image is going to be the same. The results with this action vary greatly depending on the image you're using. And some images probably just won't work very well for it. I'm not big into landscapes, but I would assume that this will be really cool for some landscapes, and other ones it will just be a mess. It'll just look like scratches, because a lot of landscapes is the darks, the lights, and the color that make the landscape come to life and have so much depth and drama. So that is the action, and the link for it for the Etsy shop is in the comments, and you can feel free to use it however you'd like. Please do let me know if you use it in any kind of image that, I don't know, use it in a very creative way, or you are really happy with the results. I would love to see what you come up with. And if you have any suggestions for future actions, I will be trying to create more as time goes on. I have a few ideas that I would like to do. It's just trying to figure out how to make them into a usable action that requires, very little as far as the user. I'm trying to make them as simple and easy to use as possible, but I also want them to be able to apply to a wide variety of images, not just very specific ones. Thanks for watching this, and hopefully I will have more tutorials here before too long, and I hope you enjoy the action.